computer is picking up a strange signal. Here, sir, you better take a look at it.
Hi, and welcome to Sci-Fi Snacks. I'm Liz J. Bradley, a science fiction author and poet who adores short fiction and snacks. Each episode of Sci-Fi Snacks is a short and sweet, or salty, discussion of what I loved, what I learned, and what I snacked on while reading new-to-me short science fiction. As always, links to the short stories are in the show notes, so if you haven't read this week's story, head on over, pick up your favorite snack, and then join me as we discuss this week's story. Hey friends, welcome back to the next episode of Sci-Fi Snacks. I am hoping that you don't notice any sort of sound quality difference, but if you do this week, it is because, if you didn't know, where I live in Virginia, we have had a crazy snowstorm that turned into an ice storm, and now many of our roads are basically ice skating rinks. I literally have watched videos of people online this week ice skating in their yards. And when I finally cleared my driveway, which took 3 days, I was pulling up chunks of ice that were probably 4 or 5 inches thick, where it was just iced snow. So I am recording from my home studio. And my home studio equipment is not at the quality of the library studio, but we're going to see how this works and how I can clean it up in post-production. Also, due to this snowstorm and personal life exploding on my end, I am recording on the tightest turnaround I have ever done for Sci-Fi Snacks, which is today is Wednesday, the 28th. This episode goes live tomorrow, the 29th, and I always mark my episodes to go live at midnight Eastern Time, US. I could choose any time, but I like to have them go out at midnight. It makes me think that, if you're in Europe listening, you get it in your morning hours as well, that kind of thing. So we are going to record and we are going to edit and we are going to upload in the shortest turnaround time. In reality, it doesn't actually take that long to do the process of the podcast. Usually, I just have a bunch of these pre-recorded and then I edit, which is my least favorite part of the whole process, but it's only because I get finicky with things and I want everything to sound perfect. And half the time when I'm recording, I accidentally record things out of order because I ignore my notes. And then I'm like, oh, well, they need to know this before I talk about this other thing. Or, hey, I forgot a content warning at the top of the episode, and that would be really helpful before I start talking about crazy things halfway through the episode. So I'm going to try and keep it as clean and as quick a process as I can this time. The only positive, I think, about recording here at my house instead of going out to the library studio is that I have my really nice fuzzy blanket and I have a lovely boxed red wine drink with me, and I've got my personal space heater and my dog. So it's a pretty great environment compared to the library studio, which is just kind of a meeting room that they converted, which is lovely. And I'm so thankful. Don't for a second think that I'm talking down on the library. But I can't bring my puppy to the library. So home wins on that front. Now, this week's story, before I ramble too much, is a story that I saw everywhere last year. And as with most things that kind of go social media viral, I clicked onto it and I was like, oh, let me read this story. And then I saw it and I was like, oh, this is weird. So we are talking about We Will Teach You How to Read. We Will Teach You How to Read by Caroline M. Joachim. Caroline M. Joachim is a 3-time Hugo and 6-time Nebula Award finalist. Her short stories have been translated into several languages and reprinted in multiple best of anthologies, including 4 times in Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy. That's a big deal. That's awesome. Joachim's short story collection, 7 Wonders of a Once and Future World and Other Stories, and the print chapbook of her novelette, The Archronology of Love, are available from Fairwood Press. For more, check out her website at carolynjoachim.com. And as always, that will be in the show notes. Now, this story, We Will Teach You How to Read, is one that you really need to see. Now, most weeks you can kind of get by with just listening to the podcast and not reading the story. I try to make it so that it's not a homework assignment, but this is one that has a really strong visual component to it. And because of that, I really think you should take a look. Now, I can describe it to you a little bit, but before I do, some stats about the story. So it was published in May of 2024. This was issue 168 of Lightspeed magazine. So it was up for the awards season of 2025. It is science fiction short story, solidly in the short story category, at 2,838 words. Now, in terms of awards, it was nominated in the short story category for both the Hugos and the Nebulas. It was a finalist for a Eugie Award, which is for short fiction that inspires, enlightens, and entertains. It took 2nd place in the Locus Awards, and it won the Ignyte Awards for science fiction, fantasy, or horror that celebrates vibrancy and diversity. And it was also a finalist for the Theodore Sturgeon Memorial Award for short science fiction in English. That's a lot. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different awards. Placed in one, took first place, so placed in 2, taking first place in one of them. That's amazing. And after reading the story, I can see why. But before we talk about the story, I'm sure you're super curious about this week's snack. So this week's snack is actually one that I find people either love them or they hate them. A classic snack of the Good and Plenties. Good and Plenties, if you are not familiar, are like these little tiny licorice candies that are coated in like a candy coating, and they come in purple and white, and they kind of look like little pills. And I just remember my mom adores these candies. And then my dad is the kind of guy who, when he finds out you like something, he will just buy it for you for forever. So she would always get these candies for every holiday. You know, there'd always be at least 1 box in her stocking. And as a kid, I loved them as well. And now in my life, I am repeating this pattern where my husband buys them for me. He stuffs my stocking full of Good and Plenty boxes. And he always remembers to get me a little extra because both of my boys are obsessed. My husband cannot stand these licorice candies, but both of the kids will eat all of mine. So he always gets me a little bit extra so that there is a guarantee that I actually get some of my own candy. Wild, huh? So on to the story summary. The best way that I can give you a summary of this kind of more avant-garde piece is to read you the first line. The first line of the story starts out, "This is our story simplified. Life, loss, transformation, love, death, iteration." And there it is. That's the story. That's not all I'm going to tell you about the story, but that is the story in a nutshell. And we'll talk about it in a little bit, but that's one of the things I really, really loved about this is it was not really like a hooky first line. but it delivers on the promise of the premise. They say, this is my story. It lists off these 6 words, and then each section of the story is titled with each of these words. This first section is iteration, then this is our story simplified. Then we have life, loss, transformation, love, death, and commemoration, iteration. So it's not an exact copy of the first line, but all of that is in there, and it provides this structure for what becomes a story that is kind of like a layer cake. Like the first layer is good, and you're like, okay, I like this. But then you get another layer and another layer and then another layer. And all of a sudden you've got this, 7, 8 tier cake. And you're like, wow, that is super impressive. And that's what I felt like was happening with this, is any one of these sections was gorgeous. It was amazing. It was well written. It was thought provoking, but you put them all together and it becomes just this majestic cake of a story in less than 3,000 words. It was great. You really should read this one. Another interesting thing about the way that this story is structured is it is coming from this alien species. It's like a transmission to us, or a letter to Earthlings. But the problem is the way that they communicate is on multiple wavelengths all at once, and we can't handle that. And so that's kind of where the title comes in. We will teach you how to read. And they say that twice. It's repeated in the title and separated by kind of this up and down bar. And that's because we've got 2 columns, at least 2 columns throughout this story, where we've got multiple things happening at once. And a lot of the time in the right-hand side, you've got this is our story simplified: life, loss, transformation, love, death, iteration. And then in the other side, you've got other messaging that kind of goes along with the title of the section. And it's so technical. It blows my mind a little bit on how Joachim was able to write this and put this together and just even conceive of it in the first place, because it blew my mind. And I was really scared of it at first, I'm not going to lie. But the way it's written, it almost holds your hand and is like, I know you're scared to read this. I know you can't handle this all. How about you try to do it this way? How about you try to do it this way? Now read this line and read this line and try to hold them both in your brain at the same time. And you're just like, this hurts, but also that's the point. And so we are hearing from these aliens, this alien species that we can't comprehend, but they are telling us that they tell this story of their life 3 times. So they tell the story once with their parents to learn their story. Then they retell this story of their lives by themselves, and they add to it. So they add all of these threads about parts of their life and new things. And then they tell the story once more to their children to teach them so that they can carry this on. And it's the whole history of their race in this one story, this one thread that continues to just grow, 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 and grow. And by the end, you get to the part where they are revealing that not as many of their children want to do this. They say it's too much and all of this. And so they're giving it to us, and we'll teach you how. And it's just really freaking beautiful. And it rides this line between poetry and prose. And you see a lot of the time, maybe not a lot of the time, but I see when I'm submitting to different online magazines, they talk about, we want stuff with weird structure, but then you don't really see a lot of that actually make it to publication, which I think makes this piece really special, because it did make it, and it is weird. And it's not just 2 columns. It goes, and all of a sudden we've got a bunch of columns, and they're all 1 letter at a time, reading vertically to kind of simulate these threads. And it's just an experience. I don't know how you even format some of this like in Word to submit, and then it's a lot. It blows my mind. But I really just loved this story overall. One of the things that I think it should get a lot of credit for is that it does second person really well. So it gives the like, it's you. And a lot of the time people use second person when it's like a letter or an open letter to blah, blah, blah. It happens in satire a lot, I feel like. But this was second person done in a way that never felt like it stuck out. You were going on this journey, and the you could be anyone. So that's another interesting thing about second person is I feel like second person assumes a lot about your audience, right? So anytime you say you're talking to the person reading. And as a writer, you can control who's reading your stuff. You know, it's like choose your own adventure novel, and it's like you and your group of teenage friends. And it's okay, that's fine. We can suspend disbelief a little bit, but like they're saying you, and they really want you to think like you as a teenager that would fit in with this group of kids going to do this adventure. And that's not a universal experience for everyone, right? But in this story, the you really can be. Any of you guys out there listening, it could be you. And it doesn't make assumptions other than the fact that you are human and you cannot comprehend, but that you are worth teaching. And I can see why this resonated with so many people to be nominated so much and to win these awards, because it opens itself to you as the reader without making any assumptions about who you are. And I think that just really lends it to this emotional payoff in the piece. You know, they use the space on the page to evoke these feelings and control your experience reading it, just like how poetry does. And poetry where they place the words is intentional. And I know poets who will write a poem and then spend 6 months or more playing with how it's formatted, because that guides your experience through the poem. And this, I feel like, I would assume, and goodness knows, I probably am wrong, but like the way that this is formatted could be done in so many different ways. And she tried so many different things. And there's this one part that I really, really loved where it literally looks like a barcode on the page. And I wasn't going to reveal this because I feel a little silly after the fact, but I was convinced. I was like, this is a barcode. And if I scan this, it's gonna bring something up. So I literally like downloaded barcode scanners and tried scanning it from my computer, tried like taking a picture of it and uploading it into like a scanner thing. It was not an actual like barcode. It was not like it looked like a barcode, and it makes sense within the story because it's talking about all these threads, and they just get so small that you can't even see like the individual words anymore. It just becomes this barcode on your screen. And I don't know, maybe I'm too much of a Swiftie where like everything is an Easter egg and it's kind of conspiracy theories, but I was sure. I was like, oh, it's an Easter egg. What does this barcode lead to? And it was not. It was just, I was way off base. But if you ever want to do that someday, that would be cool. I might do that someday. I don't know how to like create a barcode, but I bet you I could figure it out and then somehow work it into a story that is not like this. I'm reading another story right now, a novel called Monsters and Mainframes, and there are several sections. It's from like a computer's point of view. So there are several sections of the book that are just in binary code. And so I go and I'm like, oh, it's like a little Easter egg. You copy the binary code into a translator online and it'll tell you what it's saying. So I thought that this was going to be like that, and it was not, but I still loved it because I was interacting with it. I was like obsessed with the text, and it really just, it pulled me in, and I was I feel like that's all we can ask for as writers, is to have readers who are excited about your work and who are looking at it closely and are engaging with it in ways that maybe we can't even predict. So I just loved that part. That kind of leads me to the last thing that I really loved. It's kind of two things about this piece. Is because of a lot of things in my personal life, I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about the legacy we leave. And I think that there are a lot of writers out there who would agree with me that some of our writing at least, is a part of this like legacy building and a way to tap into immortality, in a healthy way, not in like a tech bro, I'm going to do all these weird wellness things so I can live forever and sit on my piles of money. Not like that, but like in a very human way of, we will all die someday. And then what was the point? Like, what do we leave behind? How do people remember me? All of these questions that are like really fundamentally human and really hard. And I love that this piece played with the idea of aliens whose life cycle is so extremely short, but they have this way of kind of coding their legacy so that it doesn't get lost, and that they use this repetition and their stories won't die. But then, even then, the children are like, we don't want to read. It's too much. And they're starting to lose those bits of their history, of their ancestry, of their message. So they're like, we've found you and we will teach you how to do this so that it doesn't get lost. And it's this juxtaposition of how we can't, as humans, even read more than one line at a time. Like, we are so stuck in this linear life and world that it makes me think about how alien it is to have a life that is super short but completely recorded and saved and repeated again and again in a way that preserves all of that, as opposed to how we seem to live our lives as humans in a straight line, where if we don't purposefully look back, if we don't look to history, we don't know what we don't know. And then we repeat these patterns, right? It's the whole, if those who don't know history are doomed to repeat the same mistakes. And like, but also, do we repeat the good things over and over and over again? Would we even ever attempt to love if we knew in the beginning how much pain that could bring when it's over? Because we feel everything in order and not all at once. And those are just like the mashup of thoughts that I had while reading this and going back and rereading it and being like, oh my gosh, like there's so much in here. And that's just what I got from it, because I'm obsessed with these ideas of legacy and why do we write and what do we record and what gets remembered and what doesn't get remembered. That's what I'm seeing in this piece. But I was super interested. I have to go out and maybe like look at reviews for this or other articles or whatnot. I would love to see what other people get, if like we're on the same path or if they got something completely different. Reach out to me on social media if you've read this, or if you go and read this after this podcast. I want to know your thoughts, because I feel like this is one of those pieces that can have a super wide interpretation, but maybe not. I don't know. And I think that kind of brings me to what I learned from this piece, which I learned some of those things like on an emotional level about myself. And, there's a lot of self-reflection from this piece, but on a writing level, like on a craft level, I think that this piece proves that you don't have to make something that's like easy and straightforward. Like, we're looking at award nominations and award winning and things like that. If you go the straightforward route, not to say that there aren't things written that are just like really, really good at the simple, straightforward thing that they do, but you can be weird. Like, you don't have to start with like a little hooky sentence. You can experiment. Short stories, especially, I feel like it's this Now, could I do a whole novel of this? Probably not. It would be overwhelming. But a short story is like the perfect place to experiment and to play with form and do all of these things. And I think that like what I'm learning is that it's okay to try weird stuff. And I'll probably fail a lot along the way. That's kind of part and parcel with wanting to write something. But like you would never get to this place without experimenting a lot and trying a lot of different things and like trusting your voice as a writer. And I think that when you get it right and it'll really resonate with people, that's why you see it, nominated in 7 different awards categories, winning multiple things. Like when it resonates and you get it right, like hot damn, it's so good. And like #writer goals to write something this good and this like juicy and meaty that like you can study this in a college class and like I guarantee you it would be amazing. It would be so cool. I think I also learned that like it's silly to be scared of reading something. I opened this multiple times. I really did. Before I even did the podcast or anything, and I would look at it and I was like, oh, how do I read that? I don't know how to read that. Like, that's intimidating without ever like realizing that it taught me how to read it throughout. I know it's in the title. I know it says in the title that we will teach you how to read, but I didn't trust. I did not trust. And so I learned to trust and that first impressions can be deceiving. In this case, I don't think it was necessarily deceiving. It still was hard to read at points, but like that was the point. So, yeah. I think I'm just gonna not let things that are scary looking make me stop reading or not read in the first place. And kind of the last thing I really learned about this when I was sitting down trying to enumerate the things that were really concrete was just that repetition. It's one of those things in a toolbox that, like, as a writer, you're taught the rule of 3. You're also taught this in theater. We were taught this all the time for comedy. It's the rule of 3. If you do something once, it just happens. That's fine. Twice is a coincidence. 3 times is funny. So you see it all the time where writers will give like 3 adjectives. And it's like this and blah, 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 this. It's a very distinct rhythm. And I definitely fall into it in like first drafts where it's like the rule of 3. And this taught me that repetition is more than that. Like it can be more than that. This piece pushes the idea of repetition so far for a really great effect. Like on purpose. I mean, I don't know how many times the sentence, this is our story simplified, life, loss, transformation, love, death, iteration. I don't know how many times that's repeated, but it's a lot. Like, if you have the time on your hands to go back and count, please let me know. That would be cool. But I'm not going to count. But it was more than 3 times. It was a lot. And it's something that kind of sticks with you. It's that thought of, if you've ever met like a pushy salesperson or any salesperson really, they're taught in sales training, and I say this as somebody who worked in sales, to use your name over and over again because it takes something like 7 or 8 times to have something stick. And it sounds like it's a slimy sales tactic, and it kind of comes off that way, but it's so that they remember your name. And also then, they're trying to be personable or whatever. But it's the same with like advertising. They say something 7 times in an ad so that you walk away and you're like singing the jingle and you remember like happy Honda days. I don't know. So this one was, I can remember this story because it repeated that line over and over again because that was the message that these aliens were trying to send to us. And in the end, how does this all have to do with the lovely snack I chose? Now, the reason I chose Good and Plenty's was it was after Christmas and they were in my stocking and I didn't have time to get a snack. And I was reading this at my kids' basketball practice. So I just grabbed whatever snack I had and it was Good and Plenty's. But I will tell you, that the story was good. It garnered plenty of awards. And it's just weird enough that some people won't like it, but the people who love it will love it so much. And that's how I connected it to my snack. Ha. All right. Folks, we are getting long in this recording, so I am going to wrap it up for the night because I still have to edit this and get it out to you. If you're listening to it on the 29th of January, 2026, I have succeeded. If you're listening to it later, we can pretend that I still succeeded because you know what? Podcasts live forever. Thank you so much for coming and listening and hanging out with me this week. Despite everything going on, I'm so happy that you chose to spend your time with me. Next week, we are going to be talking about Patsy Cline sings Sweet Dreams to the universe as long as everything goes to plan. I know I said last podcast that we would be talking about the Patsy Cline story this week, but things change. Let's embrace it. This is life. So, as always, links are in the show notes. I'm on social media at Liz J. Bradley, or you can check out my website, lizjbradley.com. I'll see you next week. Bye.